everybody. Amanda from 171 Cedar Art Center, and I am in our ceramic studio. Welcome to Garden of Fire, Exploring Our Senses 2020 Virtual Edition. So we're sorry we can't be with you in person, but this is the next best thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make a clay rattle using Model Magic clay. So at your youth center, this is for our friends at Addison and the Salvation Army in Corning, we dropped off a couple of different packets of supplies for you guys to try out the Model Magic. So you're going to get 3 packages each of some of this Model Magic stuff. Looks like this in this package. And with this stuff, we're going to kind of blend it together and we're going to make a rattle. It kind of looks like this. So this is one that I did earlier, and I decorated it using some Crayola markers. And the best part about it is it actually makes some noise. So that's the rattle part. We used some images from the Rockwell Museum's collection as inspiration for some of the design work on here. So I did some geometric lines, some zigzags, some swirls. These are all taken from seed pots that Native Americans would put their seeds at the end of a harvest in. And we thought it would be kind of cool to make this into a rattle, something that you could make sound with. And the thing that's making the sound on the inside of it is just some regular old popcorn kernels. Nothing really exciting, but it makes a cool noise when it's in there. You could use dried pasta, rice. Rice would be a good one. I liked these because they're nice and hard and they kind of hit off of one another. You could use a couple of them or you could use a lot of them. That'll change the sound that you make in them. But what I want to do is just kind of walk you through how to make your own while you're at home. And then hopefully we can get videos from all of you to see all of your creations and hear the rattles that you've made with your Model Magic. So let's get our Model Magic out of the package. Now, this stuff is a little bit different than clay. Those of you who've been with me before in previous years know that when you come to 171, we work with actual clay. This is kind of our substitute for having to do this virtually. This is something that you could get easily at Walmart or online. Amazon has lots of it. So what you want to do is just kind of put all 3 of those blobs together. It's kind of squishy and it feels different than clay, but it's almost plasticky. We want to just squish this into one big blob. So I'm being careful not to fold it too much, because if I fold it, I might trap some air in there. But just like when we work with regular clay, you can use your hands and kind of roll this around. In fact, I don't even really need any special tools. I'm just going to be using my hands today. The Model Magic doesn't respond the same way that clay does when you press tools into it. So hands are going to be our best tool for today. So I like to kind of pat it in my hands and roll it. You can even roll it on the table too. Just make sure wherever you're rolling it is clean, because if it's not, it's going to pick up whatever is on your table. And that kind of makes it icky. So I just want to keep rolling it until it kind of smooths out all of those lines from blending this together. And it's going to feel a little bit a little greasy, a little bit different than regular clay, but I think you guys are kind of used to playing with the clay that we've done in previous years. And then once it's roundish, does not have to be a perfect ball. Once it's roundish, we're going to use our thumbs and we're going to turn this into a pinch pot. The thing is, different than the pinch pots that we've made before, we're going to close this up so that it's totally enclosed and it holds all of those kernels in there so that it can continue to make the noise. But what I want to make sure that I do when I'm ready to put my hole in there with my thumb, I want to hold this ball with my hand. If I put it down on the table and then smush my finger into it, it's going to get all flat. We want this to kind of hold its shape for now. So I'm going to hold it, and I'm going to use my other thumb on my other hand, and I'm going to poke a hole. And it's going to look a little bit like a donut, but I don't want to go all the way through, because if I go all the way through, it definitely is going to be a donut. So now that I have this hole started, I'm going to put my thumb on the inside of that hole, and I'm going to start to pinch and turn. Pinch and turn, pinch and turn. And that's going to start to stretch this clay out. And as I do this, my other hand is kind of cupping and squeezing into kind of a cone shape. So this is upside down, kind of what it looks like. And I have my hole going. You can see how it's still pretty thick here at the top. That means I need to keep working. So I don't want to stretch it out really big, because I'm going to try and close this up when I'm done. If I stretch it out really big, it's going to be hard to close up. So I'm just going to continue to press my fingers into the inside. You can switch hands, whatever feels comfortable. I'm going to pinch and turn, and that helps to keep it thin, but not too thin. If it gets too thin, then we have to kind of make a patch. So you can just pull a little blob off and cover up any holes that might poke through. And as I pinch and turn, I can move my thumb and my fingers up and down the sides, because I want to make sure that this whole thing is kind of even. If it gets too thin in one spot, just move on to a new one. But if it feels thick in another spot, that means you can spend a little bit more time squeezing and pinching to help even it out. Unlike our regular clay, which goes into the kiln to turn hard, this Model Magic just has to sit out in the air, and then it dries, and then it turns hard, and it's good to go. So we don't necessarily have to worry too much about air bubbles like we usually do, but we still want to be careful not to make it too thick, because then it won't dry evenly, and it'll take weeks for it to dry. So here is my pinch pot. I'm not worried about it being even right now. It's really soft, flexible, and that's okay. But I want to make sure the bottom of this is kind of thinned out too. So I can put both of my fingers, my thumbs in there, and start to squeeze it. Kind of looks like an upside down bowl. Then I'm going to start to kind of close this up. Just use my hands, kind of squeeze it back together. So now it's not quite as wide. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for. So I'm going to take a minute, I'm going to set it down on the table, and as I do that, you might notice that it starts to like shrink down. And that's okay. We'll change the shape some more. So I'm going to take a scoop of these popcorn kernels and put them right inside. I would suggest popcorn kernels from a microwave popcorn bag, because those usually have butter on them and they'll be greasy and kind of weird. So you want dry ones. You can put a lot in. I think I put quite a few in there. Let's see. That's a good number of them. And we can set the rest to the side. So now we're going to pinch the top closed so that it's fully encapsulated and those popcorn kernels stay inside. So what I like to do is I start to kind of fold over the top. It's like I'm pinching and pulling it closed. If any of you have made dumplings before, this might be a method that you've tried to close dumplings up. This is kind of the same process. So I'm just taking a little bit and pulling it over to the side and kind of pinching it. And as I do this, I have my finger on the inside to kind of pinch and make sure that it's not getting too thick in any spot. The trick to closing this up is to just do it slowly. If I do it too quickly, it's going to be really lumpy. So I want to do a little bit at a time. As I do this, it kind of gets this swirly effect happening. That's going to be okay. We're going to change the shape a little bit. Once we get that closed up, we're going to shape it some more. So now I'm just going to kind of use my pincher fingers, pinch the top of that closed. So now I have this swirly blob that's hollow. I can hear my kernels in there, but I want to use my fingers to kind of smooth this out. And it's not going to blend quite the same way that clay usually does. So what we have to do a little bit differently is use our tabletop to help us shape it. So I'm just going to lightly start to roll this on the table. I want to be really careful not to push too hard because then I'm going to squish it. And I don't want to squish it because then it's not going to rattle. And my popcorn kernels will get all stuck to the sides. So I'm very gently just rolling it lightly with my hand. I have my hand open like this, and I'm using the palm of my hand, this flat part, to help roll it. So as I do this, it may start to change its shape. And the model magic is very soft when it comes out of the package. So it doesn't take much to change it at all. But I want to keep going because right now I have kind of all these like wrinkles and wiggles on the surface. And if I keep rolling it on the table, those will work themselves out. I tried using my fingers to kind of smooth this out when I made my example, and it didn't work very well. So I found that this was a better way to help to smooth that out. It just takes a little bit of patience to get there because you have to be gentle with it. If you go too quickly, you're going to squish it, and then it's not going to rattle at all. So roll, roll, roll. Move this around on the table. You can try doing it in your hands if you want to. I just like the way that the table is nice and smooth, and that kind of helps keep it even. And this works out any lumps that might be in there. So if you were worried about spots that might have been a little bit too thick, rolling it around at the end like this does kind of help to work those out. Now, every so often, you can kind of pause and shape it in your hands. If you want one that's round like a baseball, you can keep going. But if you want something that's a little bit more like egg-shaped or oval, or I don't know, this is almost looking like a potato to me, you can pick it up and start to shape it in your hands. The one thing that we'll have to keep in mind is we want there to be a flat spot on the bottom, because otherwise it's going to roll around and not stay put. So I'm just going to use my hands to just lightly shape this. Kind of a fat egg right now. There we go. So I still have a couple of wrinkles on there. Not a huge deal. I think if I work it too much, it'll start to lose its shape. So I want to be careful not to overwork it. And the more you touch this, just kind of the same as our clay that we've worked with before. If you touch it too much, it'll start to dry out. You want to be careful. This is not the same. You can't really add water to this to make it soft again. That'll just make it slimy and start to disintegrate it. So you'll just have to use your hands. And if it starts to feel like it's drying out on you, that's a good sign that you need to get to a stopping point. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to change its shape too much. Okay. So at this point, it would be a good time to kind of pause and take that scrap paper that you might have and sketch out an idea of what you might want to put on your rattle. So I took a minute to do this before, and I just kind of drew a rough shape, and this is the sketch that I came up with. So I used a bunch of different colors, and I used a lot of geometric shapes, straight lines, diamonds, triangles, and different repeating patterns. So this is just one side. The other side will look kind of the same. It'll have the opposite of these designs on there. And once I am ready to do my design work on my Model Magic, I'm just going to use my markers to draw right on them. So we can start that. But what you might find is because your Model Magic is pretty darn soft at this point, you might want to wait a couple of hours to let it stiffen up a little bit before you use your markers on here. I find that once this has dried a little bit and it's a little bit stiffer on the outside, the markers tend to work a little bit better on the surface and they don't bleed as much. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause and I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you what this looks like after it's dried, and we can try decorating it and see what it looks like. You might notice that as this sits and dries, it might change its shape a little bit. Everybody, here I am back. It's the day after, and I let my Model Magic Rattle sit out in the air overnight so that it could get a little bit stiffer for me to use my markers to decorate. So I just used regular Crayola markers, lots of different colors, and I also put my rattle on a piece of wax paper for it to kind of sit overnight. You could use your plastic bag that your Model Magic pieces came in, something slippery to help this from not sticking on things. If you use paper, the paper is probably going to stick to the bottom of it. And if you set it right on your table, that might stick to your table as well. So a piece of wax paper or a piece of plastic bag would be a good option for letting it dry. So after I let it dry overnight, I used my markers and I added my color on there, kind of going with what I did for my my sketch. So I kind of ran out of space, but that's okay. I fit on there what I could, and I left some blank spots so there's white in there and it's a little bit easier to read. And while I did let this dry, it did get a little bit squatty on me, just kind of sunk down. And that's just kind of how this material works. So that's okay. If it's still soft enough, you can try and kind of reshape it if you want to before you add your color on there. I'm okay with this shape. So once you add your color, you may want to kind of keep from touching it too much because it's going to take just a couple minutes for your marker to dry on the surface. If you touch it, you might smudge it and it'll get on your fingers for sure, which is a good reason to use your washable markers so that it's easy to come off. But now that this is done, I've added my decoration to it. I'm going to let it dry even longer, at least another day, if not two, so that it gets to the state where it makes that rattle noise and it's stiff enough so that it doesn't change shape when I pick it up. It'll be nice and light and kind of foamy feeling once it's done. If you wanted to, you could spray coat this with a clear enamel spray to give it a shiny coat. I just left mine plain and it'll be fine to hang out like this indefinitely. So it's up to you, but there we go. That's how to make your own Model Magic Rattle inspired by Native American seed pots and rattles that the Rockwell shared with us. And if you're interested in trying some more activities, next week the Rockwell and Care First are going to be leading next week's activity. And at the end of our video, there's a quick survey. If you could take that and just let us know what you thought and give us some feedback, that would be really helpful. I hope you had some fun, and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys.